Hi, it's Lee and welcome to the Tesla Economist. Now, as you know, I've been fairly skeptical about these 50% annual growth targets, as I haven't been able to see how they can occur. The vehicles cannot increase in production by said amounts if they're in not the factories. And by the looks of things, we won't get Mexico producing any time that soon. I said from the start of this year that it doesn't look like we will see any growth in production in 2023. There were simply no signs of it. Now, before you say, actually, last year Tesla did 1.3 million and this year it'll be around 1.8 million, how is that not growth? And yes, that's around 40% growth, which, in all fairness, isn't too far off 50%. But if you compare the run rate from the end of Q4 2022 to what the run rate will be like at the end of Q4 2023, there's been very little increase in production. So how could I have predicted this so early on? Well, like I said, there was no evidence of any production increases happening. Well, actually, the only chance of production increasing was really through the 4680s ramping. And I said we weren't going to see much of that this year either. And I was right. And no, 20 million sales is barely any. And we were actually told this too by Elon on the Q4 earnings call, that 4680 sales won't be ramped until 2024. Very few people seem to recall him saying that, and no one really talks about it. Most investors seem more excited on FSD and the potential of robotaxis, which also doesn't yet appear to be much closer. But it is early days with version 12 still, and we have yet to see what the neural net is capable of. Tesla do, however, have an exceptional ADAS system, but it's still a long way from any of us trusting our children's life in there unattended. So it was not really that big a surprise to see no improvement in 4680 sales and no major increase in production in Berlin or Texas. There needs to be factories to produce the things. However, one other major thing I have been keeping my eye on, which again I hear hardly anyone in the community talking about, as they always seem more concerned with the fact they had a trip around their city that required no interventions, is this massive CATL factory next door to Giga Shanghai. We're now hearing that it has actually started production and is supposedly the 80 gigawatt hour capacity I have been saying it would be all along. This is a really big deal. This is a bigger deal than Cybertruck, at least as far as the short to medium term financials are concerned. Now, the big question is, what will Tesla do with these cells? This doesn't even appear to be a top 10 question on say.com for the earnings call. Investors don't seem to care or want to know where and how the future growth will come from. I guess perhaps they just expect that Tesla will find a way. Where there's a will, there's a way. And maybe that makes me different from other analysts. I like to see all the steps on how to get there and estimate how and what will happen. Anyway, now although Tesla nor CATL appear to have officially said that these cells will be for Tesla, the factory is literally right next door to Giga Shanghai. So I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that this factory has been purpose-built for Tesla and these cells will be supplied to Tesla. There's no other auto companies that could take on this many cells anyway. No one else could even make enough electric cars for them. This is a huge amount of cells, enough for about 1.3 million cars a year. Who else could take on 1.3 million BEVs a year? If Ford lose 32,000 for every BEV they make, then that would mean they lose $42 billion a year if the cells were for them, just to put it into some sort of perspective, which by the way is pretty much their entire market value. Make no mistake, these cells are for Tesla, but what will Tesla do with them? Now, some people say that perhaps they'll be for Lathrop, for the Megapack factory. If that is the case, then why build them next door to Giga Shanghai? I think it's common sense to assume that these cells are earmarked for Giga Shanghai. But wait, there's no new factory there to take them, so how will Tesla handle this many more cells? Well, my theory all this time has been that they'll be used in the Model Y. For starters, these are potentially the most advanced LFP cells in the world. Yes, BYD have their Blade batteries, but they're even a few years old now. We might hope or expect that perhaps the world's largest battery company may have done a little research before building their largest factory. In fact, this is the largest battery factory in the world. Wouldn't CATL want to produce their best cells in this factory? What would best mean? The most energy dense, durable, lowest cost cells perhaps. And for those of you who know, I'm obviously referring to CATL's M3P cells, which in a nutshell are 10% more energy dense at the same cost per kilowatt hour as LFP and appear to also have the same advantages. Now, why would you want to waste such high quality cells for energy storage that stays stationary the whole time and energy density doesn't really matter when there are so many potential consumers not buying EVs because the range is not long enough? So if these are to go into Model Y, perhaps with a Highland equivalent facelift that is also expected to happen mid next year, known as the Juniper update, then we should see a rear-wheel drive Model Y with over 300 miles of range, and the cost to build them might be about the same as it is right now. That's a massive leap in specifications, and you would hopefully expect demand to increase dramatically, especially with the new look and feel and added features like screens in the rear of the cabin. I mean, it is an insane car for the money, such incredible value. You'd basically think that anyone is a moron who buys a Toyota RAV4 or even a BMW X3 instead, and you'd be right. Of course, that would be if the consumer was actually aware what the Model Y was offering. So perhaps it's more moronic that Tesla doesn't advertise. Or who knows, perhaps this is what Tesla is waiting for until they properly start advertising. I'm unsure if these cells will also be used in the Made in China Model 3s as well. If they are, then the Highland is going to be around the mid 300 mile range, which is exceptional. How is anyone else going to compete on these EV specs anywhere? These levels of range are highly impressive, and Legacy can't even reach this much range for the equivalent vehicles using high energy dense nickel based cells, with batteries that cost about 30 to 50% more than Tesla. And this is without even using structural battery packs. There's no doubt that Tesla's lead is so far ahead, it's not even funny. That's not the point. It's the EV market that needs to grow more, and as Tesla is the main supplier, it's up to Tesla to make more EVs and push them out to consumers and educate them about the advantages and benefits of owning a Tesla or EV. There's no incentive for legacy autos to do this, given they lose tens of thousands of dollars per vehicle. Okay, so back to the original question of Tesla's growth, and where will this growth come from? Well, perhaps currently Tesla consume around 120 gigawatt hours a year of cells. This new CATL factory is 80 gigawatt hours. Well, perhaps currently Tesla consume around something like 120 gigawatt hours a year of cells. This new CATL factory is 80 gigawatt hours more, or a 67% increase in cells. That is even more than 50%. But if we're saying they're all going to be earmarked for Giga Shanghai anyway for the current production and not expanding the factories there, then how is that any growth? Well, it's not, at least not when it comes to vehicles. Unless possibly Tesla send these LFP cells to the US or Berlin and use these cells to ramp their production there, as there is still the capacity in Texas and Berlin, as they are only running at 30% capacities. This is a possibility, but I think maybe unlikely. I think that currently there is not enough demand for Model Ys, that if they increase production that much, then prices would have to be cut too much in order for demand to meet this additional supply, at least with the current EV adoption, along with the current economic conditions we face. If Tesla sent away these old LFP cells, the specifications of the Model Ys they produce in those other factories would not be close to the ones coming out of China either, and thus will not likely sell very well, yet cost as much to produce as the new ones. Therefore, I think that the old cells will be used for energy. We have Lathrop with 40 gigawatt hour a year capacity, and then the new Shanghai Megapack factory at another 40 gigawatt a year capacity. And wouldn't you know, 40 plus 40 equals 80, or the same amount of capacity as the new CATL factory. This would explain why Tesla chose to build the new Megapack factory in Shanghai instead of Europe too. Anyway, I've actually been saying this since last year, as soon as we saw CATL break ground on this new factory, that it is exciting and something to keep watching, as it is a sign of Tesla growing and leveling up, and it looks like we are finally getting close. And just to give you some idea of financials, if each of these cells increased net profits by $150 per kilowatt hour with 80 gigawatt hours, that would be an additional $12 billion in profits. Tesla didn't even produce the equivalent of that in the last Q2 earnings. This would mean Tesla's profit more than doubles. and puts it at about a P ratio of 30 based on the current stock price and this new level of profits. This is why, as an investor, it is a bigger deal than the Cybertruck potentially, and many fanboy investors are obviously very much into the products as well, and focus more on them and the excitement they bring than the fundamentals. It would also appear that Wall Street have entirely missed this also. Anyway, hopefully, but unlikely, I bet, someone mentions it on the earnings call perhaps. Hi there, thanks. I'm using Verbalate AI video translation and lip sync software. It's pretty amazing. Watch this.
I can translate my videos into other languages. For example, I am now speaking Hindi. नमस्ते, मैं पहली बार हिंदी में बोल रहा हूँ, लेकिन Verbalate इसे इतना आसान बना देता है. Or how about Spanish? Hola, vaya, increíble. También puedo hablar español.
Sign up at verbalate.ai today to gain early access to trial the product for creators and strategic partners, and gain the ability to translate and lip sync videos in all major languages. You can view the info in the description below.